with Matt Russell of the Naval Academy. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Damon.
Yeah, this is going to be awesome. It's a long time coming. I'm really glad we're able to do this. I was wondering if we could start back at your very first time you jumped into goal. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I absolutely do. It was in my hometown, Madison, Connecticut, and it was in the parking lot. My dad opened the trunk of his car and said, "Here's some equipment," and we all scrambled to the back. And I gravitated towards the goalie stick and the chest protector and the massive old helmet.
Nice. Just
Pre
threw them
pre
on and
Cascade helmet.
jumped right in there, huh?
Yep. Yep.
I love it. Were you, I started playing in college and was instantly scared of the shot. Like, whoa, like I can't believe these guys are shooting it this hard. Did you have to deal with those feelings of being scared of the ball?
No, I started that experience was in fourth grade, and so the average probably velocity of a shot was less than 5 miles per hour. So I think I just grew with the sport,
Hmm.
and it wasn't really until I got to professional lacrosse where I thought I had to be really mindful about, like, do you really choose to step in front of that shot or not, because you might break a finger, you might really hurt yourself. So no, and I was fortunate.
That's really good. That's pretty unique, right? You're one of those. You're one of those goalies we can qualify as the crazy type. All
Yeah.
goalies are a little bit crazy, I think, but the
Yep.
ones who don't fear the ball, watch out for those guys. So that must have made you a pretty good goalie growing up, right out of the gate. Would you say?
Yeah, I think my dad was the coach, and just the neighborhood fathers were, that picked up the sport were the coaches. So I would say I was good in the sense that I had quick reflexes and wasn't afraid of the ball, and was athletic. It probably wasn't until I really got to college and worked with Ray Finnegan where I would say, like, it all came together, and I really had a kind of set style of play.
Mm-hmm. And I want to get to that style of play because it's definitely unique. What about other sports? Did you play other sports growing up?
Yeah, so it was a hockey family I grew up in, and
Okay.
played soccer as well. But we were actually, yeah, we were all kind of pushed to play hockey, and my dad had played, and my brothers played, and I stand a mighty 5'8", 165, and so to play Division I competitive hockey, I think you ultimately needed to be bigger, and I know lacrosse has come a long way from that standpoint, but I found my way in the lacrosse field, and candidly, like, because I was better at lacrosse, I got pulled and was more interested at the end of the day in the sport.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever play any like midi or attack in the sport of lacrosse?
Yeah, it's one of the number one things when I've coached over the years I recommend to young goalies as well. One of my best friends was the other goalie, and so from fourth grade all the way to high school, I only played goalie half the game or half the
Wow.
practice. And why I think that's so important is, like, for goalies to, when you have a midi cutting right and shooting across his body, like, naturally the mechanics of kind of where that ball is going to end up, there's probabilities, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
or an attackman, coming around the crease, it's just natural when they're looking for the slide man to dump the ball into the bottom right corner or the top right corner, right? And so if you have those muscle memories as an attackman or a midi, I think that just makes you a better goaltender.
100% agree. Yeah, 100% agree. Getting a little experience on the other end and knowing what the attack, even as an offense, not just one single shooter, even as an
That's right.
offense, like what they're trying to do, ups your goalie game tremendously, I think.
Yep.
So you don't really have much goalie instruction kind of growing up, or do you? Is there someone kind of coaching you and kind of showing you the ropes, or are you sort of figuring things out on your own?
Yeah, so there was my mentor in the sport early on was a guy named Greg Gatrano, who's a legend in the sport, and I was lucky enough to attend a camp with him, probably fifth, sixth grade, and really gravitated towards his style of play. He was super aggressive, came out of the net a lot,
Hmm.
and so what my parents did, which I was fortunate with, over the next 2, 3 summers, I kind of followed Greg Gatrano to camps
Wow.
and really adapted his style of play, I think, in a big way early in my career.
Yeah, that's interesting. Wow. Yeah, I've spoken with Greg. I've yet to get him on the podcast. The cat need to
Yeah,
get that guy. I need to get that guy on the podcast. Maybe you can help arrange that. We'll talk about that afterwards. But
absolutely.
um, awesome. So in addition to kind of like adapting his style, he taught you like the basics of like, this is the stance, this is the arc that the positioning that you play, this is how you make a save, those type of things.
Yeah, that's right. And I think like, what it comes down to is every goalie is different in our sport, and we're all different types of athletes. And
Mm,
so I think one of the things that he taught me early on is you need to be an athlete and you need to be explosive. And what that looks like for you versus myself might look a little different in terms of how far apart our legs are, where our
mm,
stick is, in terms of being completely vertical versus kind of halfway out, how far out your hands are, how far spaced your hands are, what your arc looks like, all of those things. I'm not someone that was a big believer in there's one way to do it. I think it's you have to adapt to the goalie. And that's something Greg taught me.
yeah, 100% agree with that. I 100% agree with that. I interview so many goalies. I think this is going to be podcast, 83 or 82 or something like that. And I've learned so much along the way. And a lot of times what people explain to me, it just doesn't work for my style, but I'm not going to rule it out for a kid that it could work. If you've got a 6'3" frame and you're 220, then you might be able to have success with the wide base, right? And playing back in the goal,
That's right.
on the arc, but not me and not you, right? So that your style is more, when you watch Matt Russell in goal, the style is really, legs are moving, you're kind of coming out, challenging the shooter. How would you describe your style of play?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I would say super aggressive stance, and if I wasn't ending up, from starting position in a high arc to where kind of I made contact with the ball, if I wasn't ending up at the edge of the crease, which is
Mm,
that's a 6 foot radius, right? I was kind of making up a lot of ground, and I was not. I would describe it as I would never wait for the ball to come to me, right? Like in midair, I would go attack the ball and not decide or wait and say, okay, how is that ball going to skip or bounce
mhm.
or take another hop or deflection? I was going to go say, okay, once the ball is out of the stick, I make a judgment call on where to go to and where to move to. And the other part of that is, I would say early on in my career and even through college, candidly, and I know the sport's gotten more competitive and shooters are better, but even being a smaller goalie, even at the college level, playing a higher arc. I think the stat I'm most proud of to this day is goals against average, not saves that percentage, but goals against average. And one of the things that kind of I think about is there was multiple times because of my high arc or my positioning, an inexperienced, call it shooter at the high school level or college level wouldn't even take the shot,
Mm,
right? Because
yeah.
they didn't see the cage. Now, you flip that on top of its head, and I'm sure we'll get there. But when I got to the pros, I realized these shooters didn't care at all where I was in the cage. And so I said, there's actually more benefit to me having a little bit more reaction time. So I
Hmm.
pulled back my arc, and probably cut it in half.
Yeah. I think that like you and I are the same size. I'm 5'8", about 165 as well. And I think that, for that size of a goalie, like you can't play with your heels on the arc. That it's tough. It's really tough because you just don't have the reach. You just don't naturally take up as much of the cage as like a Scotty Rogers or a John Kincannon, those Jack Kincannon, those big guys, right?
Yep.
So I for goalies who are that size, I really encourage they at least give that style a try if they're not doing it already. Wouldn't you
Yeah.
agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then the thing I tell goalies is meet the ball at the point of impact. Like go get that ball. Don't let it come to you.
Hmm. Yeah, that is a great stat, that goals against average, because it factors in many things. Like one, the saves, which all goalies should be able to make, but two, just your ability to run a defense. Right,
Yep.
that's certainly factored in, and then winning ground balls and chasing out shots, which was a big part of your game. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
to this day, I think Navy, that 0405 team, when we went to the national championship, we still hold that record in NCAA for goals against average, which I'm proud of because it comes down to whether it was me taking an angle away or communicating with a defenseman that just made a great play and made a low percentage shot come off, which was easy for us to swoop up and transition the ball.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. Cool. So kind of going back to your story, when was it? in high school when you first kind of realized like, hey, I could, I'm pretty good at this. I could probably play at the next level, or how did that come to be?
Yeah, I went to Fairfield Prep, which is a Jesuit high school. Followed my older brother there, and the motivation for going there was one my brother was there, and two, it was, ironically, there was a hockey team, and my high school, my hometown didn't have a hockey team, and so that was really one of the drivers. And we were a competitive team with a great coach, guy, Chris Malkice, and I would say, it I probably realized by sophomore, junior year that I was going to be competitive, which was super exciting. And my parents put me in a position with, at that time, it wasn't travel teams. It was
Right.
going to top 205 or whatever it was to get in front of the right coaches.
Yeah. And what ultimately made you select the Naval Academy?
It was funny. I actually told Coach Urich at Georgetown that I was going to come, and this is before, I guess, all the big signings and stuff like that. But I just reflected, and I don't know how I got to this conclusion when I was 17, 18 years old in my head, but I said, you know what, I want to serve, and so I ultimately decided to kind of step back and rethink that, and then chose the Naval Academy, which in hindsight was I would call it the best decision I've made in my life. So,
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your service.
yeah,
I really appreciate it. My dad was in the Army. We've been telling stories since I've been back. He's been
gotcha.
telling stories since he's been back visiting, but really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
No, appreciate it. Love doing
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So then you get to the Naval Academy, and you mentioned kind of that at that point, that was, where maybe your game took a step up, or you got some like very focused coaching. Could you talk us
Yep.
through like what that was all about?
Yeah, so I knew it was going to be a battle. So I came in my freshman year. There was a goalie that had just started, a guy named Seth Tanola, who's an extraordinary athlete and a team leader, and just like his work ethic and all the above. He checks all the boxes, right? And so
Hmm.
immediately I had had a lot of work ahead of me, and then freshman year I in a boxing incident, I had dislocated my shoulder, and so I had to have reconstructive surgery. And so I would say freshman year was more observing, watching, rehabbing my shoulder, and picking up a couple tips. And then Ray Finnegan really broke down my game, and brought it to the next level. And I was lucky enough, to get the start, one or two games into my sophomore year.
Wow. What are some of the things that Ray taught you?
Yeah, you know, I would say, watching the ball come into your stick. I know it
Mhm.
sounds like such a simple concept, but just really like, watching everything from the release of the ball all the way into your stick, right? So many
Mhm.
goalies, especially like on a bounce shot, and you and I played in a time where not every field was a turf field, so there's a lot of grass fields and a lot of trickery around that, and like so many goalies just kind of keep their head looking down the field, or look down, but just really kind of focusing, laser focused on watching that ball hit your stick. And then, I would say over 50% of the time I spent with Ray Finnegan was shots from within 3 yards. So we would
Wow.
spend a ton of time where he would be behind the cage or another goalie feeding behind, and we would get a lot of like enclosed shots. And we used what was called the mirror technique. In other words, if he was on the back right side of the cage, I was in the back front left side of the cage, the opposite side. So there was a lot of positioning. In other words, putting your body in a position, that allowed for kind of highest probability to be there and get hit by the ball, or just be an athlete when you turn.
Yeah.
And he was just massive about when you turned, wherever you were in the cage, just being an athlete and being explosive. And I think like, just being kind of compact and explosive combined with kind of what he taught me, it was a struggle at first, but it certainly really helped. And having a dedicated goalie coach too, like I tell people,
Mm.
having that many reps is unique, right? Not every goalie gets that, and a lot of youth programs have one coach caring for 20 kids, and it
Right.
doesn't always work out that a goalie gets a lot of reps.
Yeah, and you've got like a dedicated person that knows you, so unlike, the head coach, if there's just one coach on a youth team and maybe they work with the goalie once a week,
Yeah.
This, this coach is working with you every day. And if they see something like a bad habit developing, they can quickly correct that.
Yeah. And I would,
Um,
and and sorry to cut you off. The other aspect of that is really like the quality of the shooter, right?
mhm,
When I was in high school, for instance, there was an assistant coach that was a college, player. And so he was shooting the ball 100 miles an hour at me. And the average shot I was seeing in a high school game was probably what, 50, right? And Ray
mm,
Finnegan was a really good shooter, and I was seeing a lot of really high quality shots. And so I always joke, and there's a lot of truth to this. I wish I could have gone and played professionally for 1 year and then come back and play college, because the velocity of the shot just makes you so much better. And so any young goalie, it's like if you can get a great shooter that's going to really throw the ball at you, in the game, it's going to look like a beach ball. So
yeah, absolutely. I highly recommend that for youth, to playing up a little bit,
yeah,
like during the summer league, even just summer ball, if you can, like, and getting those higher quality, higher speed reps.
yeah,
Um, h- and then you go back and then people are shooting, 10, 15 mile an hour slower. And you're like, this is pretty easy.
yeah,
Not easy, but I wanted to go back to a point that you mentioned, because I thought it was a great one, where when I asked, what did he teach you? It was like, watch the ball. And it is what you said. And everyone's like, well, yeah, duh. But that kind of, sometimes there's so much going on as a lacrosse goalie. I mean, we could talk for hours about it, right? Like, you got to be a leader of the team. You got to know the defense. You got to call out the slides. You got to do all this, your positioning. And then all of a sudden, like, this very basic piece of advice, and what everyone starts with, you lose track of. And so it may sound like very
yeah.
simple advice, but going back to the basics is many times what a lot of goalies need to up their game, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and one drill to help with that is just putting a player stick in your hands, right?
Yeah.
You get those shots that are just like naturally, oh, I'm going to save this, but then in practice, swap out your goalie stick with a player stick, and I guarantee you, your eyes are going to watch that ball hit your stick every single time.
Hmm. Awesome. Would you call yourself like a natural leader?
Um, I would like to think so. I
Yeah.
definitely like corralling the troops and motivating a defense, and I would like to think I also have kind of a calm demeanor about me, and so I think that's an important for a leader of any defense or offense.
Yeah. How did you go about demonstrating those, becoming a leader of those men at the Naval Academy, when you got that start as a sophomore, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, it's definitely earned over time. I
Hmm.
would say, first and foremost, watching guys like Seth and Ola, right? Like, where their work ethic is just second to none, right? And so, having that credibility that you're going to work harder than anyone, is important, right? Like, because you want to lead from the front. And then beyond that, there is some correlation between a leader and a performer, and you have to perform and to be able to lead. And so just kind of focusing on the basics and making saves kind of translated to gaining the trust of what was a more senior defense.
Yeah. Love it. Did you work with Mickey Jarbo at all?
I did.
Awesome. What was he like? Because he a two-time goalie of the year, Naval goalie, Naval Academy goalie. What was he like?
Yeah,
Or what'd you learn
so
from him?
when I visited the Naval Academy when I was in high school, he brought me around. Based on the
Mm,
time gap, by the time I got to the Naval Academy, he was at flight school. He's a helicopter pilot, and then he went on to, I believe it was San Diego. So I didn't spend a lot of time with him when I was in college, but
mhm.
when I moved to San Diego in the military, he was out there, and then we actually had a chance to play together professionally, which was fantastic and a lot of fun. And in terms of what's he like, he is. He's highly emotional in the cage, which I give him a hard time about. Giving his defense a hard time and pushing people around him. And his reflexes are incredible, right? And so he makes saves that he has just no reason to be able to make, and he also gets the ball out of his stick quickly in transition.
Nice. Nice. Awesome. So then you're at Naval Academy, and it sort of, I guess, like, I don't know, if, like, accumulates to the 2004 season,
Yep.
where Navy goes on an amazing run. You have an amazing season, winning goalie of the year. Was there anything different that you sort of did leading into that 2004 season, or was it just sort of like, just all your experience kind of leading you to where you were?
Yeah, listen, it was a story of momentum, when we were, it was a lot of, a lot of sports writers call it, fairy tale season, and that's what it was,
Mhm.
right? Like that was my sophomore season as well, and so, the week before the first game, the head coach brought me into his office and said, Matt, you didn't get the job, and so the week leading up to our first game in the season, I had transitioned to being a riding attackman. And so my
Wow.
morale couldn't have been any lower, but I showed up, I hustled in practice, and, we ended up losing to Ohio State, I believe it was, in the first game of the season. And, the team just needed, a change, at that moment in time. And so I got the look against North Carolina, which, I don't think we were expected to win that game. And I played well, and the rest is kind of history from there. And it was a fun season, and we had really strong classes kind of across the board.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't know that. So in the year that you won goalie of the year, you weren't even
And
the
and,
starter
fir-
at the beginning.
and first team All American, and I was a riding attackman in the Ohio State game on the field.
Awesome. That is so awesome. What a motivational story, right? Because a
Yep.
lot of times, goalies think they need to win that job right out of the gate to have any success in anything or to go to college or to get the looks. But I mean, here we are saying like you were riding a tackman in the very first practice, and what did that lead to at the end of the season? Goalie of the year and a national championship
Yep.
showing. Unbelievable.
Yep.
Unbelievable. What a great story. And then ultimately, that well, let me ask this. What was it like to play in a national championship game?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a blur. I think that probably was my nerves talking.
Hmm.
It's a big arena, it's a big stadium, and but super exciting.
Yeah.
Certainly I would say I was nervous going into the game for sure.
Yeah. Were you a goalie that got a lot of pregame nerves? I mean, all goalies get like pregame nerves to some extent, but some goalies get it like I feel like vomiting every single time. And some goalies are like, yeah, I've got this under control. Where did you fall on
Yeah,
that
no,
scale?
I would say I was mostly pretty calm. The co-captain of my team, a guy named John Bersner, I think threw up before every game, and so that was never me. But no, I watched a ton of film on shooters and kind of the release of how they shot the ball, and a lot of setups and plays and man up. And so, I always felt prepared, and I think maybe that calmed my nerves going into any game. And, by that point in the season too, we had beaten a lot of teams we weren't supposed to beat. So, we had a chip on our shoulder still of being the underdog as well.
Yeah, yeah, I bet. And then that gives you that confidence with each victory.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I got pretty nervous, but once I got going and got kind of made, it was usually the first save for me. I hate to say that because I
So
feel
true.
like I feel like goalies should come out of the gate like firing, but typically for me, whenever I got in the first or got hit with the ball, bam, I was in it and all nerves were gone, and then you're just
I, I,
playing.
I I agree. Now that you say that, I think that's probably where I fell on the spectrum as well.
Yeah. I just recently watched that 2004 game, and it's got some of the most like unbelievable sequences. Just
Yeah.
like just the ground ball goes back and forth one way, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because players with a stick technology have a lot more stick control. Like the ball stays in the stick these days, but there are just some really wild sequences in that game.
Yeah. There was a lot of up and down run and gun type lacrosse, which was the Syracuse's advantage. Navy, our strategy was to slow the ball down, but
Yeah.
we had great midfielders like Graham Gill and the Looney brothers that were able to kind of go toe to toe in terms of that transition game and beat great ground balls. And I don't think a lot of people realized even on the television, there was like some rain, some like pouring rain for like 5 minute periods. And so, at that point in the time, like
Uh,
with, stick technology, right? What isn't what it was today, or isn't what it
yeah.
is today. And so I think that probably created more chaos as well.
Yeah, and there's one play like at the end of the third quarter where like I think it's a Syracuse guy. He's about ready to go out of bounds, and he just like Gilmans it, kind of like
Yep.
sidearm all the way down the field, and you just don't like see that anymore. Like people rarely at that level, rarely Gilman it. They're always just, they've got the control with their stick and they can turn around and find somebody. And that ends up leading to a play where I think you dislocated your shoulder on that play, right? Like you come
Yeah,
out and just do a massive hit. Can you
yeah,
tell what happened
yeah,
there?
exactly. I saw that Gilman coming, and because it was a Gilman, I don't think our defense was set kind of man to man, and so I took Brian Neon, who's a big individual at Syracuse, and it wasn't my intention to be in that situation, but the way the ball bounced on the field, it went right into his stick, and so I knew I needed to hit him as hard as I could. And so, not being fully kind of prepared or positioned to hit him, I just hit him awkwardly, I would say. Didn't think much of it, but call it, save the play, and they didn't score
Yeah.
on that transition. And a couple minutes later, realized, I think maybe as I was clearing the ball, that something was wrong with my shoulder. Um, and you fast forward, post game and everything like that, I had broken my collarbone and dislocated my shoulder, and so the issue was every time they would reset my shoulder on the sideline between plays, they were moving my collarbone fracture further apart, and so
Ah,
it was creating more issues for me. So
yeah. But you ended up playing like half of the fourth quarter, right?
yeah, it was no, I a lot of adrenaline, and
Yeah.
certainly wanted to be there for my team.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Um, yeah. And then what a spot I forget the backup, your backup goalie's name, but what a spot for him to come in. Tie game, national championship, cold as a penguin. I mean, geez.
Yeah, yeah. Colin Finnegan, actually Ray
Colin Finnegan.
Finnegan's son, and again, great goalie, and just yeah, tough situation to come into for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for recapping that tale. It satisfies my curiosity. I know a lot of listeners are probably wondering
Yep.
because when you're watching the TV broadcast, you kind of forgot about the hit. All of a sudden, mid fourth quarter, it's like, wait a minute, Matt Russell's coming out of the game. Like, what
Yeah.
happened? So
Yep.
awesome. Talking about training goalies, or maybe like kind of switching topics a little bit,
Yep.
training goalies or training yourself. What are some like basic drills that you like to do?
Yeah. I think the core is super important. So I was a big believer. I know agility drills have come a long way since I was in the cage, but I would say just using a medicine ball, kind of throwing ball, across your body,
Hmm.
sitting down. You have to have a strong core in the sport. You know, jump rope or things of like that nature that are more like fast twitch, I think are important. And then from there, later in life, which I kind of grew to love, is boxing too. Is a great activity, and I think probably pretty easy to do for goalies in high school, just to get a set of gloves and hit a bag, right? Like a lot of the same kind of fast twitch muscles and a lot of movement across your body. I think plays well.
That is true, right? Like throwing like a right cross is kind of the same thing as exploding,
Yeah,
across your body to make an off stick type save. And great point about the core. Like my brother-in-law, who I'm recording at his setup right now, he's a personal trainer. And when we watch tape on goalies, his a lot of the workouts that we do are a lot of core stuff, a lot of resistance. I'm really big. I love resistance bands. Like throw
yeah,
resistance bands over somebody and then just have them walk the line or have them, make their saves, and that kind of builds those
that muscle
muscles up.
memory.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What about let's say, 12-year-old kid comes to you, you're coaching them for the first time, raw ball of clay. How do you mold that? How do you mold them into an elite goalie?
yeah. You put them in the cage right away, and if it's stage fright with getting hit by a lacrosse ball, you quickly put tennis balls in place, and you
Hmm.
see what type of athlete they are, right? Are they going to be someone that makes a lot of saves with their stick? Are they going to make a lot of saves with their body, right? Like, and then you adapt from there. But I think like the where we started the conversation, the fundamentals in terms of there's a certain way to hold that stick. There's a certain arch you should walk on. When you're making saves, transitioning from a feet behind the cage in front of the cage. I think there's these 5 or 6 kind of core things that every goalie fundamentally needs to have. And on that list of 5 or 6, I would say if they don't have the right headspace, they
Mm.
shouldn't, right? You're down and out and beating yourself up. it's too tough of a position to bounce back when you're psychologically not there.
Yeah. How do you go about coaching that? Or how do you go about developing, that mental toughness? Because it's such an important element. I mean, we talk about it literally every podcast because it's that important. And everyone's got, kind of their own take on, how you become mentally tough because it's such a complex topic for such a difficult position. So I'm curious how you go about building mental toughness.
Yeah, listen, I think it was probably because of the players I was surrounded by and the coaches I was surrounded by, and those are the people where none of those people that I would say were mentors in my life, paused to feel bad for themselves, right? It's kind of pick yourself up and be a good teammate, and part about being a good teammate is being accountable. If you let a ball in and it's clearly your fault because you're out of position or something like that, well, pay it back the next one and work that much harder. So I think it's just being selfless and being a good teammate.
Yeah. I love that. Don't feel sorry for yourself. It reminds me, I had this wrestling coach in high school, and he would say that all the time. As you're like, like in pain or doing some drill, and you start feeling sorry for yourself, and you're like, guys, dude, your opponents don't feel sorry for you. You cannot feel sorry for yourself.
Yeah.
I love that attitude. Awesome. Anything else come to mind when you think of mental toughness, or is that kind of the main one there?
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, yeah, being accountable too. I
Accountable.
hate seeing goalies that, pass blame. Like if you got scored on, it already happened, and move on, and huddle the defense, but not in a way where it brings down their morale, or the attackman be like, oh, they're on their heels, they're all yelling at each other, bickering at each other, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just comes back to being kind of that tough mindset, like you said,
Accountable. Yeah.
and,
Go
and and
go.
and not letting anyone see it.
Mm,
You can be down and out, but I think like true character is built by those that like get knocked down and are able to get back up.
yeah.
That fits adversity.
Yeah. Going back, just kind of jumping back, I just thought of something. So would you say like lacrosse at the Naval Academy is different than lacrosse at like say a Duke or at a Virginia? Because when I think of the military, I think of very structured. Accountability is sort of like built in. And I have no idea how the Naval Academy runs at all.
Yep.
So I would love to hear your take on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the service academies attract a certain type of person, and without a doubt, like there's that level of accountability and responsibility that you need to take. So I agree. I would say, what the service academies over the years, over the recent history, have maybe lacked in raw talent, lacrosse talent, have probably made up in things like grit, right?
Yeah.
And if it's a 50-50 ground ball, not feeling sorry for yourself because you're already bruised up on your arms, but going out and getting that ball, or laying out to the sideline to make sure that you're to the sideline after a shot. And so those little things add up, and I think like that's what you're going to get from a service academy athlete.
Love it. Love it. Awesome. So after the Naval Academy, is that when you went to professional lacrosse, or did you go train in San
Yep.
Diego, and how did that come to be?
Yeah, so I right out of the Naval Academy, I was still at the Naval Academy for that summer, and so I was drafted to the Baltimore Bayhawks. Played a little bit for them before I had to get shipped out to San Diego to start military training. If you fast forward, I did deployments to both Iraq and Afghanistan. But during workups and training, I had the opportunity to play with Mickey Jarbo and a bunch of other Naval Academy guys for LA Riptide, which was just a phenomenal experience. There was a guy out there, GW Mix, who was the general manager, and just he picked a team of just like people like this from the service academies, like a guy named like
Mm,
Anthony Kelly from Ohio State, just like maybe not the best players on the field, but just like raw grit. And we had a great run there. And after those two deployments, I came back, took a little time off from the sport just based on kind of my military obligations. And then, Scott Hockstead and the Ritz brothers and Kyle Harrison asked me to play in LXM Pro League, which was a ton of fun. And, for those that don't know the LXM Pro League, it's, kind of merged in and is no longer, but that was predominantly on the West Coast, and which is, again, great opportunity, great experience, great guys.
Yeah. It was kind of like the PLL before the PLL, like a traveling
Exactly.
pro league of the best players, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. And then you mentioned earlier in the conversation how your goalie game specifically adapted because these guys were just picking corners mercifully. So you had to step back to give yourself a little bit more time. How was that for you? Like, how did you adapt to that style?
Yeah, I think professional lacrosse, at least at the time, was more of an offensive game, run and gun, right? Like, there's a couple components to that. Is it's more individual defense style. It's more there's a shot clock, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I was spending less time orchestrating, hey, how the defense was going to position in a particular play. It was kind of athlete versus athlete, and I knew I was
Mm-hmm.
going to see rubber. And so it
Yeah.
was really focusing on, let me put myself and my body in the best position to make a save, and the trade-off there was having a little bit more time to react to the ball.
Yeah.
And another thing was, there's a lot of different release points from professional lacrosse players. Like Kyle Harrison comes to mind. In college lacrosse, one of the reasons I was so successful, I feel like, is I watched a lot of film on these shooters, and a lot of them, it was pretty cookie cutter. It was straight over the top, and I kind of knew where that ball was going once it left the stick, so I didn't need as much reaction time. Versus Kyle Harrison has what called, essentially a jump shot, and so I wouldn't even see the release of the ball. And
Mm.
so I was already a step behind with a lot of these shooters, and your time to react is just significantly reduced.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
needless to say, my goals against average wasn't so great.
Went
Yeah.
up a little bit, huh? Yeah,
Yeah.
as you do. Well, I don't know if lacrosse even now with the PLL is it's an offensive game. I mean, let's just put it that way. Like these goalies do you watch any PLL?
Yep, a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, these goalies, I mean, they're doing a tremendous job, but in order to package up this sport of lacrosse and make it entertaining as possible, all things do not favor the goalie.
Yeah,
So,
no doubt. Yeah, I mean, I think we, as a Navy defense, we probably average something like 4.5 goals against us a game. And professional lacrosse, I don't know what my average was, but it was something like probably 12 or 15.
wow.
And you just have to be in that right headspace to accept that.
Wow, 4.5 goals a game. That is phenomenal. That is phenomenal. That's got to be some sort of record, huh?
I
Is
think it
it?
still stands.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. What about a time that, either with your time at Navy or in the pros where you went through a slump, where you weren't kind of playing at that level that you were accustomed to playing at? Did that ever happen? And how'd you get out of that, if so?
Yeah. I'm trying to reflect. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think I don't look at it in terms of blocks of time, maybe by seasons, but more by games. I like to think of myself as someone that, I can remember every save, every play. The number on the jersey of the guy that shot the ball against me, right? Like, I was pretty, I would say, locked in and in the zone. There's
Mm-hmm.
one game that comes to mind. I think it was 2005 against Johns Hopkins at Hopkins. Again, it was I can't even tell you the score of the game, but it was something probably like 8-10. And I always reflect back on that game, and that was a game we should have won because, of the, call it, 10 goals I let in, 2 of them were just, in my opinion, inexcusable. And maybe that's beating myself up too much, but it was just like that lack of focus for one moment, and one of them
Mm-hmm.
was like a low to low shot, which is maybe the easiest save to make as a goalie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And whether it was nerves or just bad luck, that game kind of always stands out to me in my head.
Interesting. Interesting. Um, what were you a big like after a goal goes in? Were
Yep.
you a big post goal? Did you have some sort of post goal ritual that you would go through, or what was your process there?
Not really. I mean, if I felt like that, it was a breakdown defensively, we'd huddle the defense and we would talk about it. But a lot of times I would just kind of quietly reflect in my head, and I made it a point to never let anyone know whether it bothered me or not, and just
Mhm.
kind of move on to the next play.
I like it. And then sticking with rituals, or any like pregame rituals? Were you a big pregame ritual guy?
Yeah, I always listen to Eminem. You have one time, one chance, one opportunity.
All
Because I
right.
think
Yeah.
it's again, like every shot counts, every save counts. So I thought that got me in the right headspace, and I hit all three pipes before the start of every game, and little things like that. But I wouldn't say I was call it like over the top.
Yeah. 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 I'm not like, I got to have a blue Gatorade and eat chicken parm 3 hours before, or 3 hours and 5 minutes before. And
No, no,
some goalies go nuts.
yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. You mentioned a couple times watching a lot of film on shooters. What specifically are you looking for when you
Yeah, it
watch
was
film?
yeah, I think again, this is all the way back in kind of 2004, 5, 6, and maybe all the teams are doing it nowadays, but we got this technology that one of our assistant coaches, Mark Goers, ran. He would take as much film as he could collect from around the NCAA before maybe we played Army the next week, and say,
Mhm.
okay, Army's had 6 games so far this season. And I could click, okay, this shooter at West Point Army has taken 10 shots year to date, 2 shots against Loyola, 2 shots against Maryland, 2 shots against Hopkins. And I would study the dodge, the shot, the release of the shot, and where they would shoot the ball. And so, when we got to, for instance, the game that this paid off the most, and probably what I think is my best college game, was against Cornell in the quarterfinals leading up to the national championship. Um, they had this extraordinary attackman, and I can't forget I can't recall his name in this moment in time. And there was one situation, he was 8 yards out, he was all alone, and he shot the ball over 100 miles an hour. And it was one of those things. I'd watched film, I knew where he was going to shoot the ball, and I just had to make a guess. And
Mhm.
it was probably, again, one or two goal game, and it was those types of saves, in college lacrosse where your plus or minus a goal makes the difference. And so, I prided myself on that, and didn't necessarily have the luxury in the MLL with that, but with LXM with two teams, certainly, it helped being against the
Okay.
same shooters all the time.
Yeah. Wow, what a resource. What a great resource to be able to see, all the shooters' shots. And I mean, a lot of them have the same tendencies.
Yeah,
Um, right. And then
there's
like, sorry,
go ahead.
like you said, at a certain point, when someone's, 8 yard step down shot, like you got to read them and beat them. And you have that, like, you have that image in your head, or some sort of
Yeah,
additional information to help you beat them. And you've
yeah.
got to use that.
And there was another example I'll give you. Joe Walters, again, a phenomenal lacrosse player, at Maryland. I was so confident that I knew his 3 shots, inside, mid range, and far range. And I had told the coaches before the game, if he's at this distance at this location, we're going to have a call. And I had the defense step away from him, and so, and because he was so confident he could score from there, and I was so confident that I would make that save. So
Hmm.
we got basically 5 free transitions. I would say I'd have the defense step away from him. He would automatically shoot to the same spot. I would go to that spot, make the save and transition, and they never knew that. And like, again, that was great. Coaching staff working with me on that.
Wow. That's amazing. So did you ever get burned like that? Where like, oh yeah, if this guy's 8 yards out, and he dodges whatever down the left alley, he's always shooting stick side off stick high. And then you go for that and then he shoots, stick side low. Do you
Of
ever get burned
course.
like that? Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. But I would say, like, even though I'm talking kind of boldly here, it wasn't like I stepped to that location before the ball was released, right? So it wasn't like a close your eyes and go there. It was confirmation, that hey,
Yeah.
my body's going to lean this direction in anticipation of this, and so It wasn't like, they shot left and I went right, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But it was just more, what Ray Finnegan talked about was loading. Like I would load my legs and I would load my body to explode in the direction of where I anticipated the shot to go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good word, loading. Because when I look at your style, like a lot of times you are kind of like loading and getting ready to explode.
Spring,
I
yeah.
never use spring out. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Love it, love it. With everything you know right now, Matt, what would you go back and what advice would you give to the younger Matt Russell?
Um, Yeah, no, I mean, I think I had great mentors in the sport, where, that back to kind of one of our earlier points is playing goalie, playing other positions, right?
Hmm.
And really, playing for the love of the game, right? Like, I was in a hockey family and ended up being a lacrosse player, and that was okay, right? And so, and then putting yourself in a position, to be successful on multiple fronts, right? Georgetown was a better lacrosse program. I considered Syracuse; they were a better lacrosse program. And but I chose the Naval Academy because that hit a number of buckets. If I didn't end up getting that starting position, that was still the right, I think, decision to make. And so I think, just staying positive and realizing you're going to face adversity and working through it.
Yeah, I love that staying positive comment. That's a huge one for what I tell goalies. Because positivity is just so important. It's so
Yeah,
important. It makes you successful as a goalie. It makes you successful really in whatever you do. So
that's right.
um, always be positive. And like you said, you had options. Georgetown might have been the better, lacrosse program. Syracuse might have been a different experience. You probably would have had success at all of them. But knowing that the path you took is the right one for you, I think is really important. It's going to work
Yep.
out in the end.
Yep. Absolutely.
Love it. So now you're living outside in New York. You doing some coaching? Not yet.
Not coaching just because we're in the COVID
Yeah.
environment, but definitely passionate about coaching. And yeah, I'm in Westchester, New York, and live in a town called Larchmont, and looking forward to getting involved in the programs. And my nieces and nephews are starting to play, and so there's
Love
a
it.
lot of lacrosse ahead for me, and I've got two young boys as well. So we've already got fiddlesticks in the house.
All right. Well, congratulations on those young boys. Couple more questions. Do you remember the stick setup you used back in the day?
No, it was fairly generic, so nothing I would say unique about the stick setup. I think I transitioned to monster mesh for 1 or 2 seasons in the pros, just because
Hmm.
the shots were coming so fast and I needed to absorb the ball a little bit more. But
Yeah, but do you had the head was just the original Eclipse? Is that what you used?
yep, I used the Eclipse for a long period of time. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, same here. Same here. All right, Matt. Well, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your goalie knowledge and your stories and everything. If people want to learn a little bit more about you, are you on the social medias or is there somewhere that they should go?
yeah, no. Well, first, thank you for having me. Always great to talk to another lacrosse goalie and share stories. And yeah, no, not necessarily active on social media right now. I do know Ray Finnegan has a couple, I think, goalie tapes out there. They might be VHS at this point. So a little bit outdated, but no, I mean, I think there's a lot of great instruction out there right now, and I think there's a couple clips. From my time working with both STX as their sponsor and LXM Pro, of kind of me giving me tips on YouTube as it relates to faking inside kind of shooters,
Hmm.
and the likes. So sure, enough to get dangerous with.
All right. Well, I'll track those down. Maybe even I'll try and track down that VHS tape and see what I can do and put them in this post when this comes out.
Yeah,
Matt, if you had to leave the goalies out there with one final piece of advice, what would that be?
yeah. Play with no regrets. Play hard every practice, every game, and everything else from there will work itself out.
Love it. Ladies and gentlemen, Matt Russell. Matt, thank you so much.